football just the Farmers League now. We have just watched Paris Saint-Germain win their first ever Champions League title, which they've obsessed about with the arrogant passion. Daniel Day-Lewis wanted to drink all of our milkshake. In there will be blood. Really a riveting 90 minutes, an incredible demonstration of shoot out the lights collective football, the champagne football. This was Dom Perignon Brut champagne. It was absolutely delirious. It was emphatic. It was an obliteration. Liberté, Égalité, Désiré Doué, Dembélé. Just a night of nights. And thus, the PSG project, which has pursued the Champions League, a little bit like Miles Teller banged his jazz drums in Whiplash, ends its drought, obliterating sad old man Inter Milan 5-0 in a record blowout in this final. Phenomenal big game performance. Really just the most lopsided battle between Europeans, two great fashion capitals. We'll be joined imminently live from Munich Stadium by the Crown Prince of Harrogate, the gelato genius. Oh, the brain in the bottle, the David Beckham to my Tom Cruise, Mr. Rory Smith. He'll be with us. I cannot wait to hear. I'm not sure if he stayed for the game or maybe just there for the Lincoln Park gig. We'll talk about all of it. But what I do know is that you, dear GFOPs, can be a massive part of the show. We've just seen PSG renounce their elephant graveyard global brand name hungry past. They are winners. Come and be part of this. Ask us your questions about football or life. Just scan the QR code in the top left of your screen. Take you into a Zoom with our producer, Tony. Tony will get you set up to ask your question. Come be with us. It's audio only. Do not be afraid. Oh, come and ask the hardest question in the light of day. If your question or comment can't wait, slap it in the chat. Give us that like on the bottom of the screen and subscribe. Join the channel. Come and be with us. Let's go and bring in live from Munich. It's Rory Smith. Raw!
Hello.
Magnifique.
Can you hear me? Can you see me?
I can see you. I can hear you. You look gorgeous. You sound even better than Lincoln Park, Raw.
I like the tapas approach to music where they played like 2 seconds of each song. I think that's
but at the same time, baby, it was too long. At the same time, it was 2 seconds too long in every regard.
I'm concert before the game neutral, Rog. I think it's okay. People like having fun in different ways. But I tell you what I did like. I like the violinist guy. Did you see the violinist guy?
I saw the violinist guy. When I saw the violinist guy, Raw, I was like, football, when it does entertainment, somehow it's just like the decision-making goes completely distorted. Like, why not just have Siegfried and Roy out there at some point? Go full hog.
I think give the people what they want. Everyone loves Seven Nation Army. Everyone knows the words because the words are lo, do, 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 do. So get a violinist to play it. Don't try and make them listen to other music. Do chants.
Yeah, who thought, how can we make Seven Nation Army better? We can play it with a very jaunty tattooed violinist. I thought it was magnificent in every regard. Just a few ice carvings and some fire would have made it perfect. It sounded loud from kickoff, Raw. How loud was it? What was the atmosphere really like? And my God, I mean, it's such a complicated wheels within wheels set of levels of questions. I want to dive in with you.
The atmosphere was brilliant in the run-up to kick-off, like the hour beforehand. I thought it was excellent. And then Linkin Park happened, and that doused it a little bit because it was very loud. I think what they decided was that quite often the concert is booed or whistled or in some way jeered before the Champions League final. So they just turned everything up to 11, which made it impossible for anyone to hear anything else. But it built, and from kick-off, it was that call and response of PSG's ultras, Inter's fans, kind of trying to make their voices heard. And it changed, to be honest, completely with the goals. Because by the time PSG scored the second, after 20 minutes, one half of the stadium knew which way, well, both halves of the stadium knew which way this game was going, and one half didn't like it. And that, I think, doused the atmosphere considerably. So you had this, the PSG fans are off to my left. They've actually just come onto the pitch in what can only be described as a really well-organised pitch invasion. They seem to be kind of operating their own cordon around the players. They're now being kind of gradually sent back into the stands. But they were in full voice, flares, pyro, all the works. And the Inter fans, to be honest, sat there looking a little bit haunted by the entire experience, because this wasn't like 2023 where they went in as underdogs and performed far better than anybody outside Italy, let's say, expected. This was a humiliation. This is the biggest margin of defeat in European Cup final history. This has been a bad night for Inter.
I mean, devastating, emotionally haunting. This was meant to be a battle of experience. This was meant to be a guile. This was meant to be Croft. That first 20 minutes, not only were they 2-0 down, but the heroes that had taken them there, the heroes who'd made them dream, they couldn't even complete a pass, never mind get out of their own half. Was that a testament to just the swarming, joyous, complex, positionally PhD level football that PSG were playing, or was there something else there, just the exhaustion of a season, the old legs, the failed Serie A, the failure in the Coppa d'Italia, just a sense of doom and mortality and death that had kicked in?
I think there were a couple of things kind of happening at the same time. One, Inter fans have said this team looks tired all season. I think there's a lot of Inter fans who were surprised that they made it this far. That was definitely a factor, as was just the sheer youthful zest and energy and brio of PSG's team. But I also thought, if I'm honest, I thought Inter looked nervous. If you look at the first couple of passes, I think Lautaro misplaced one, underclubbed it, just didn't make the right connection. And Nicolo Barella, who's probably their best player, really, there were one or two that he just got his radar wrong. And I think that set the tone. I think they suddenly felt, they looked at PSG and thought, oh, hang on, these cost a lot more money than we did. That was the vibe you got from the Inter team, that suddenly they looked at it and thought, okay, Barca had weaknesses, Bayern had weaknesses. They were looking at PSG almost in awe, and they seemed daunted by the prospect of playing PSG.
I mean, God, there's Fabio MA2025 says in the chat, a year for first for Liverpool slot, first for Chelsea, for Newcastle, for Crystal, and now for Crystal Palace, and now for PSG. By the way, I just love the idea of PSG getting compared to Crystal Palace.
Similar colours. Actually, on the kit, I saw we had a comment about Inter's yellow kit, which they wore apparently because they think it's lucky. I think they don't think that anymore. But I personally am of the view that Inter's black and blue stripes are kind of rich European heritage, whereas PSG mess about with their kit the whole time. So I think that maybe set the tone. Inter having to wear yellow didn't feel right. Not sure this is a canon result, to be honest. They looked like a team wearing not just the wrong kit, but at times the wrong boots.
Oh, God, Rory, I want to get to the questions in just one moment, but I do need to ask you to hit a couple of questions here myself. There is that human side of the story, the Luis Enrique story. It's been well told, and it should be told. It deserves to be told and retold, how the loss of his daughter, a tragedy that, would scar and devastate emotionally most human beings, but he has somehow embraced it with renewed life purpose, talked about it bravely, audaciously, talked about how it's almost made him fearless. One of his great quotes is, they say football is life or death. That's nonsense. Life or death happens in a hospital. It's almost like he's freed from fear. That freedom from fear, you almost see that in the play of his young footballers. It's like he's taken his own life experience and imbued it in these young swashbuckling talents.
Yeah, he's a really compelling character, Luis Enrique. This sounds really cliche, but he's a man of contrasts, Rog. He's really hostile to the media. So I did countless press conferences with him when he was at Barcelona, and he'd be really not nasty, but kind of mean to journalists. But then he opened up the Spain camp when he was manager of Spain. He ran a Twitch channel and just gave everyone his tactics and his training methods. He's really open at the same time as being really closed. He's incredibly intense, cycles to work on his road bike every day, really ascetic lifestyle. Apparently at the press conference he was complaining about his belly. I don't think Luis Enrique has any body fat. I think he is a man completely devoid of it. And then there is the story of his daughter, which is impossibly tragic. As I think any parent would tell you, it's one of those things it's quite hard to look in the eye, because it's such a sad thing to happen to anybody. The fact that he's able to have that zest for life, to go into work, to be such an energetic, such a kind of bouncing character, is testament to who he is. The way he he uses her memories, Anna's memory, to inspire him. The way he seeks inspiration and almost like comfort in his grief by living his grief, I think is genuinely inspiring, and something that I don't think. I mean, it's not something I can do, but I think it's incredible that he can. And the most beautiful moment of this final, and the impact that he's had on PSG can't be underestimated, because he has given them a human face. He's given this grand nation-state project a human face. There was a beautiful moment after they lifted the trophy, PSG, where the PSG fans, who were obviously still massed ranks in the stand before they invaded the pitch, unveiled a giant banner, a tifo of Zana wearing the number 8 shirt and planting the Barcelona flag, or the PSG flag, I guess, in the turf. It's a photo that's quite famous from the 2015 final, when she was on the pitch with Luis Enrique to celebrate. And you could see his face, incredibly touched, clearly very moved, and actually quite finding it, as you would, like quite hard to kind of deal with the emotion of that moment. It was a really beautiful tribute, and it felt really fitting, because he has said and spoken very openly, admirably openly about it, about how much inspiration he finds in her memory. And it's really hard not to be touched by that.
Yeah, and that he said he wanted to plant a flag after this game for PSG, as she once had for Barcelona. Football, again, is at its best when it transcends football. In this Luis Enrique story, you do get the best out of football in every regard. I want to touch quickly. I'm going to take a call, and I want to get into another couple of issues. But I do want to ask you, this life philosophy, this fearlessness, this collective football, it almost feels, Raw, like he's imbued it most profoundly in Dembele, now the front runner for those that care in the Ballon d'Or, but taking a footballer that seemed to be in that kind of doom spiral of a young prodigy, big money, almost frittering away their prodigious talent, but this turnaround season of human wonder, almost by fusing himself to the collective, and we saw that tonight with the 2 assists. He's become the searing individual that we all thought he could be when we first saw him break through at Dortmund.
Yeah, there's as a pure coaching job, what Luis Enrique's done at PSG is incredible. You know, you think about the context into which he stepped in, which was that basically this club was uncoachable. They were a collection of stars. It made no real sense. They sort of acquired players because they were attractive and glamorous and talented and didn't really have any kind of clear plan behind it. And he's not only coached the collective identity into them. If you look at that front three, there will be teams, in fact there are teams across Europe who are looking at that front three and saying, right, that's the future of attacking tridents. That is what Liverpool's attack will look like next season. It's how Arsenal want their attack to function next season. That fluidity, that kind of interchanging of position, the fact that they're impossible to mark because you don't know where any of them are going to be. Doué pops up as a right winger, a left winger, a centre forward, a number 10. Kvaratskhelia does the same. No one has any idea. Dembele might have gone to the shops at various points in the evening, and you wouldn't have known. He could have been playing left back. He could have been in the stands. He might have been doing the
that first goal, Hakimi, they're 3 yards out. I mean, astonishing. The most Enrique goal that ever Enrique. I mean, Enrique clearly been looking at Ndai, Beto, Jack Harrison and saying, I want some of that.
But you're right, Roger. That Hakimi goal, that was Achraf Hakimi playing as a 6-yard box poacher.
Astonishing. An astonishing moment, but not astonishing if you've watched this back half of PSG, the back half of PSG season. I mean, that's ultimately the story within the story, how PSG have found themselves in this. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when we laughed that they weren't going to make it out the group stage. And I don't know how you say in France, he who laughs last, but that's what we saw in every way. I do want to get to the questions. My favourite state, Maine. Oh, we've got Mike D. Come on up. Tell us where you are in Maine, Mike D. And what's your question? Okay, Mike D. The question.
Hey, sorry about that.
That's all right, Mike D. You beautiful human being.
You know what it is, Raj? I'm a Stoke City fan, so I'm a little slower than most people.
That's all right, baby. I'm Mike D.
This question is going to be direct.
I'm Mike D, and I get respect. Your cash and your jewelry are
all I expect.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I didn't know you were up in Maine now. Where are you in Maine, baby?
I'm in Kennebunkport area.
Oh my God, golfing with the bushes. Life is good. What's your question for Mr. Rory Smith?
It's pretty simple. So, I mean, I was watching the first half. It was sort of shocking at how Inter sat back and didn't do much. So I was expecting a tactical change in the second half. Do you think that they should have done something differently, and would it have mattered?
Yeah, I was really surprised that Henrik Mkhitaryan came out for the second half. I thought Henrik Mkhitaryan looked like he was in his mid-40s for most of the game. I was surprised that he didn't. Sorry, it's slightly cramped in the Allianz Arena press box. I was surprised there wasn't more attempt by Inzaghi to change the way the game was going, because the pattern of play was so obvious from within the first 10 minutes really that what Inter were doing wasn't working. They were too deep for the first goal, I thought. Whether they got kind of caught. Beg your pardon?
It's all you, Ro.
Oh, sorry. Whether they got caught in the headlights a little bit, I don't know. Whether they just felt a little bit powerless, whether there was nothing they could do given just how much more energetic, how much quicker, how much more individually gifted PSG looked. But yeah, I was surprised that he didn't seem to have a trick up his sleeve, because that has been kind of Inzaghi's calling card, not just this season, but over the last 4 years at Inter, that he does change things, make small tweaks within games that have really kind of significant impact. And even at 2-0, I was kind of thinking, okay, if they get to half-time at 2-0, there is a chance that he does something. Luis Enrique doesn't know how to counter it. They get a goal back, and at that point, PSG might panic, because PSG have that in their locker. But I didn't see anything particularly that made me think Inzaghi had even gone into the second half with a change of strategy other than try and do what you were meant to be doing in the first half, but better. I didn't see anything that kind of asked any new questions of PSG, and that, I think, is unusual for Inter.
You know what it reminded me of tonight? And I'm sure everyone in world football is talking about this. When I moved to New York, I used to play on a five-a-side football team at Chelsea Piers. If you're in New York, I may have played you. And I played on a team with like Huffer and Puffer, mostly Oxford and Cambridge Blues, who were very good at football. We were quite good at football. We'd play like a bunch of 16, 17-year-olds who'd like drink a couple of beers before they go on. They'd absolutely murder us. Like, we'd score the most beautiful goals ever created at Chelsea Piers, but they'd score like 5 for every one that we could make. We just could not keep up with them. We couldn't mark them. We couldn't understand the speed, the agility. I actually retired mid-game. I went to elbow. I'm not proud of it. I went to elbow an opponent in the face, and he was so fast, I just whiffed. And when you elbow, I do believe it's legal, when you elbow, just complete and utter whiff air, it's time to retire. I substituted myself out, walked off, never played football again competitively. That was what Mkhitaryan's game was like tonight. I was Mkhitaryan. Mkhitaryan was me. He was an old man playing not just a young man's game, but a very, very young man's game tonight. And it was an absolute destruction. Come on up, Peter. Oh, I'm going to ask you where you're from, but I think you're even in Sweden, Big Pete. Are you there? Come and unmute. Tell us what your question is for King Rory.
Okay, I'd like to ask Rory and you, Raj, how should we look at this big project by the Qatari state? Should we think it's a good thing that they get closer to us in the West, and maybe we can influence them by our views on human rights? Or is it a bad thing where they've kind of hijacked something we love to further their own political interests and ambitions? What do you think?
Where are you in Sweden, Big Pete?
I'm in Stockholm. A week ago, I was in Liverpool celebrating the title.
God, of course you were, you Swedish man of wonder. Savour every moment, savour every memory. I love Sweden more than I can say. I long to be over there with you and Jens Leitman. But Raw, how do you evaluate? I mean, I did talk about this before you got on a little bit, but I wanted to wait for you. You know, you have the humanity of the Luis Enrique story, and we also have to come to terms with the nation-state reality. And the big picture, the amount of money that's been poured in to, is it $2 billion since they took over 11 years ago? Also the power brokering that's in there. I mean, a fascinating human being. And by fascinating, I really mean complex. Al Khalifi, the president who has fingers in so many pies. Barney Renee's comment, he's got his fist jammed in there. In many ways, he is the pie. How do you understand it? How do you evaluate it? Do you have tools by which we should think about it?
Not really. I think it's in terms of the PSG context tonight, it's really complicated because they are an undeniably lovable team. They're fun and they're brilliant to watch and they're breathtaking and they're young and they're exciting. And Luis Enrique, as we've said, is this incredibly sympathetic, compelling character. But at the same, and they are, as you can probably hear from the fans, they are a club that has ardent support, like ardent cross-class support in Paris. They are kind of a marketing thing. PSG, they always have been, but they also have a deep-seated, deep-rooted working-class fan base, and one that cuts across identity lines and race and gender and religion. But at the same time, they are a sports washing project without a shadow of a doubt. It's a nation-state political project, PSG. So I think you can, I don't know, maybe you can't. You can maybe look at it and say you can feel pleasure for Luis Enrique. I am happy for Luis Enrique. I don't know him, but I'm happy for Luis Enrique. I'm happy for Twicha Kvaratskhelia, a player that I discovered, Rog.
By the way, you did. He was nothing.
He was nothing until he met me.
Yeah, if you've heard the Human League song "Don't You Want Me, Baby," that was actually written about Rory finding Kvaradona and then Kvaradona just moving up and forgetting all about him.
And now he thinks he's too big to talk to me. Yeah. But no, I think you can be happy for individuals, Rog. I think that's okay.
Yes.
You can believe that they deserve to win the final. You can believe they deserve to win the competition because they are the best team. They have been the best team in it this year since January. But you can also feel hugely complicated and unsure about what Qatar buying a club, turning it over the course of 15 years into a major European power, transforming the European football landscape in the process. The Neymar deal had huge, quite dangerous inflationary effects on the transfer market. It's probably run quite a few clubs close to bankruptcy. You can make a case absolutely that Barcelona's financial troubles can be laid at PSG's door effectively, that everything changes when PSG come in. I think we learn. I did a lot of reading around the PSG takeover in preparation for tonight for the piece that I've written for The Observer. And what you realise is that I think that our understanding of what is going on has changed over time. So when there was an awful lot of soft soaping of Nasser Al-Khelaifi and PSG in the early years, it was, this country wants to improve its image, so they've bought a football team. We didn't realise that, and maybe we should have done, maybe we were being naive, but I think the football public in general didn't realise at that stage what they were doing it for, what the UAE were doing it for at Manchester City, what Saudi Arabia were doing it for at Newcastle. We certainly didn't see the kind of pernicious influence that it would have. That, I think, is maybe more understandable. I think in terms of the original question, we've learned, look, them own Qatar, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, these nation states owning football teams is not going to change their human rights records. That it doesn't work that way. There is the idea that by being exposed to us, they would kind of adopt our values, which I think is I mean, what are our values? Do you know what I mean? I think in the West itself, that's a much more complicated question than we'd like to think it is. But it doesn't work like that. Well, I think it is deeply naive to think it can work like that. I think we have to ask ourselves whether we are okay with these social institutions that mean so much to people being owned by actors whose interest is not in the preservation of those institutions. That's where I come from on it. I can't pretend to solve geopolitical, cultural issues, but I think football has done a really bad job of protecting itself from all sorts of actors who do not have its best interests at heart.
A terrible job, an utterly terrible job. I've talked about this a little bit before. If you spend any time with major hedge funds, for instance, they have strategic planners on their staff who think about the potential outcomes of everything. I am yet to meet anybody in football who has thought through whatsoever. No one's thought through, what happens if the nations, states who own these teams become genuinely conflictual. For instance, with the English, with Britain, the owners of the English Premier League. Well, no one saw any of this. They just took the money. It was not thought through. They're here. Premier League created problem. It's not a PSG created problem. They followed the lead of the Premier League with the nation-state ownership. And so ultimately, PSG on one hand tonight, and this is the point of why they brought them, this was they didn't just scrape this 1-0, a shin goal. This was not like Tottenham Hotspur, God bless, winning the Europa League without having a shot on goal, and thus they won. This was absolutely this was the most exquisite, stunning, unstoppable, joyous, young, soulful obliteration. They didn't just lift the trophy; they ripped it from all comers and now own it and possess it. It was so bloody dominant, which is the point of why they bought the team in the first place. And as I said, behind the scenes, which is not why we watch football. We watch football for deeply emotional reasons. Today, PSG made us feel alive in the same way as Lionel Messi made us feel alive in the final of the World Cup. It was that exhilarating. And football is an emotional currency. So to understand the question, Peter, we really need to understand what Al Khalifi's doing behind the scenes as European football's ultimate deal maker. You know, I listed off the boards he's on. It's incredible. By the way, humanly incredible. The man is on runs PSG. He's on the executive committee and the leading hand in UEFA. He runs the European Club Association. As I said, he runs the new group UC3, the joint venture between UEFA and that European Club Association. Humanly, I'm like, how the hell he multitasks? Like, I'm in awe of that. I mean, genuinely.
When does he sleep?
Yes. I mean, part of me is like, oh my God, please. I'd love to get a seminar of how you pull all this off, because he must be the master of delegation. But also, you know, by the way, I forgot to say, he also runs beIN, a major broadcaster. One of those phrases, if there's no conflict, there's no interest. In football, we don't ask enough about the questions, Peter. What's going on behind the scenes, the smoke-filled room intrigue? It's the opposite of why we watch. So to answer your question, you really need to be able to detangle all of that. And the goal of all this winning football, and that's tonight we saw the culmination, it was global attention for the nation-state of Qatar. It's what led to the desire to host World Cup 2022. I think tonight is arguably so much bigger, even than World Cup 2022. Because this is year-round. This was magnificent.
But also, Roger, it was, and it'll be really easy to kind of criticise Inter for not turning up, and they did without, they didn't do themselves justice tonight, Inter. But look at the teams. PSG went out and dropped $70 million on Kvaratskhelia, the best player in Italy probably, in January. And I've got to admit, when they signed him, despite my love for Kvara, you sort of think, well, where does he fit in the team? They've got Bradley Barcola, they've got Desiree Doué, they've got Dembele. They don't need another winger. He has transformed them. He's had an undeniable impact. Inter's most expensive signing in history is Romelu Lukaku, who obviously doesn't play for them anymore. The most expensive signing they had on the pitch tonight, I think, was Benjamin Pavard, who cost about €30 million, $30 million. Nicolo Barella was similar. Inter is a team that economically cannot compete with PSG. They are operating in completely different worlds because of PSG's backing, which is from a nation state. What you saw was a breathtaking display of football from an incredibly vibrant young team, but it was also raw economic power playing out on a field in Munich.
I mean, funnily enough, when I listened to you, I remember Qatari Airlines sponsored both of these teams' front of shirts a couple of seasons ago. They gave PSG 60 million for that right. I think they gave a quarter of that to Inter Milan. That's where we are. I talked earlier about Miguel Delaney's tweet about the wage bills of these teams. Part of that is what we saw tonight. But come on up, Richard. Unmute. Tell us where you are and what's your question for the beautiful Rory Smith. Ricardo, I think you're from Ohio. I can answer that question. What a state that is. Unmute. Tell us where you are, baby. I can ask you a question if you are too shy, because it is a banger. A lovely, lovely segue. Does this make Rory Smith, PSG, favourites for the Club World Cup? See how our heads immediately just ricochet to the next big one.
What's next? This one's finished. What's up next? Yes, because, kind of, I think, because they are young and that will help, given that they're all at the end of a really long season. I would say it makes me think that Inter probably not a great bet for the Club World Cup. If you look through, you have Manchester City have looked tired quite consistently. Real Madrid will take it really seriously. They've paid 10 million euros to get Trent out of Liverpool so that so he can play in that competition. That they would be up there. But I think given this performance, given the confidence they'll have, given the kind of energy in those legs, you'll have to go quite some way to beat PSG if they take it seriously. That's the big question with the Club World Cup. The clubs as institutions are taking it seriously because the amount of money that's on offer. But whether the players take it seriously is a different matter, because that comes with prestige, and prestige isn't something that can just kind of be imposed on a competition. I think PSG and Real will be into it, and I think Manchester City will be as well. And if they are, I would have thought the winners will come from one of those three teams.
I do know, having spoken to them, PSG are incredibly serious about how they're setting up for the Club World Cup. But your question's a great one. Manchester United were very serious about their tour of Malaysia, and we saw how that went raw. It is about the players. Oh, from my favourite city in America, it's the great Erin. Come on up, tell us where you are, and what's your question for the big raw?
Hi, I'm coming from Chicago.
Where about, Erin?
I'm in Wrigleyville, so right by the Cubs stadium. I know I should have lied and said the White Sox stadium.
You know what? I've had many great nights in bars very close to your hometown. It is one of the absolute jewels of that city. What's your question for the Mighty Raw?
I was going to ask about how we've sort of seen a bunch of really small teams throughout all leagues who are getting really smart with recruiting and, tactics with all these like cool, fun young managers. And then we've sort of seen at like the biggest stage, PSG kind of pivot away from being a Galactico team, as well as Real Madrid have like kind of a stinker of a season while spending all that money on pretty much the most expensive players out there. Do you think that the sort of state of the quote unquote Galactico team is going to completely change after this? Or do you think it was just a weird season where a bunch of trophy droughts ended and this team that took a big pivot won something big?
That's a great question. I think those two were the last real holdouts of that kind of Galactico thinking that the PSG had been, and it's in a way it's worked for them, because I bet even in Chicago you see loads of PSG shirts. There's PSG shirts everywhere now. That kind of Galactico era has really helped them from like a brand point of view, and I think that's important to them. But it's those two alone, really. I don't know, what do Manchester United do? Do Manchester United have a Galactico culture? What happens when you have a Galactico culture, but all of the stars are extinguished and they've gone like supernova and exploded? I think football as a rule is significantly smarter than it was 10 years ago, and more like way smarter than it was 20 years ago. So it was just PSG and Real Madrid because of their weird circumstances that had that kind of Galactico logic. Most clubs now try to be smart. They don't always succeed, and they're not always trying to be smart in the right way, if that makes sense. I was having a conversation about this with somebody before who's saying that kind of they will quite often run into teams who've done some analysis, but when you actually are presented with the analysis, it will be alarmingly basic. And I think there is a lot of that in football, that people are trying stuff, but they don't really understand it. But I'm not sure. I think we are already in a post-Galactico era, with the kind of slight like asterisk that occasionally Florentino Perez will just sign somebody. Like he'll just do that because he's got that in his makeup and he can't really resist. PSG, I think, have learned a lesson. Everybody else is kind of has best practice or something close to it, or an idea that is the best practice they should be using. Very few other teams go for that kind of star power alone. Manchester United might if they were in the Champions League, but they're not, so it's not relevant.
We're going to take one last question in 1 minute, but we've got a beautiful question from the chat which really caps this game. Domino Aquiguana says, would Barcelona ultimately have given us a better final, or is PSG just that good?
I think better final, but not like a different outcome. I think PSG they have been the best team in Europe since I think they went 2-0 down to Manchester City in the 53rd minute on January the 25th. I may have researched that earlier, Rog. Since that point, they have been by some distance the best team in Europe. They absolutely dismantled Liverpool twice. and Liverpool were the runaway Premier League leaders. They somehow lost the first game in Paris and then got through on penalties at Anfield. And to be honest, and I saw a friend of mine who's a Liverpool fan tweet this earlier saying, losing 1-0 at home to PSG and losing on penalties now looks like a really good result. That's a great night's work for Arne Slot's Liverpool. They had that weird half an hour against Villa where they sort of collapsed but didn't really and got through. But other than that, for 150 minutes of that tie, they were way better than Aston Villa. They finished off Arsenal in 4 minutes. That tie was over from the 4th minute of the first leg. They never looked like losing, and they've dismantled into tonight. Barcelona, I think, would have worried them more because they had more attacking firepower. I think, Nuno Mendes would have been concerned by Lamine Yamal. I think Rafinha's form is such that they would have exploited the gaps in PSG's defence when they went forward. I think ultimately PSG would probably have beaten Barca 5-2 rather than 5-0. But it would have maybe been more entertaining, more of a contest. But I think the outcome's the same.
God bless. And now they get to be crushed by Spurs when the Europa League finalists and the Champions League finalists collide. I cannot wait for Big Ange to do them. But to pull this together for us, let's bring back, now a regular on this show. It's the mighty Patrick. Remind us where you are and tell us what's your question for the beautiful Rory.
Hey, hi Rory. Hi Raj. This is Patrick from Evanston. I'm from Evanston, Illinois. Just a little bit to the north of where Aaron was, but so I would guess but I've of course hung out in Wrigleyville and Rogers Park and a bunch of the north neighborhoods. But my issue is, so with PSG winning, and with the idea of sort of the financialization of football, is there any argument for having sort of and I know they're going to hate this term because a lot of people, my English friends who are fellow Toffees, don't seem to understand this as well, of a salary cap, i.e. a total squad salary and expenditure cap. And I know it's hard to do it over the entirety of the top 5 leagues, but it feels like that would make things more interesting. We've seen how engaged people get when Palace win the FA Cup and Newcastle win the Carabao Cup. And you have a lot of engaging things, or when Leverkusen goes on that incredible unbeaten run. It feels like that makes the game more engaging and exciting and everything. Whereas instead of to bring it back to the Merseyside rivalry, Roar, I hear so many of the red half of Merseyside, whether it's by the 2 coworkers and 3 of my students here, talk about whining about how they can't spend and FSG doesn't spend. Guys, you're being subsidized by the Boston Red Sox and financial markets over in the U.S. and are complaining you don't spend enough, you don't lose enough money for your liking. We would have loved that. And so that's always a part of it is that there's this 2 halves. One, there's this disgusting amount of overspend of essentially people who can't accept losses like PSG or like Newcastle or now or like Man City. But then there's also this other side of the Kroenkes don't spend any money, FSG out, whatever, when they're being subsidized by people who are actually making profit. So I guess I just wanted to bring up those 2 issues and see how that sort of spectrum of issues works for you, Roar and Raj.
God, what a question. Patrick, what do you do professionally? Are you like a accounting professor?
No, I'm a teacher in middle school. I'm a TA in middle school.
Hey.
I'm going for my certification in ELA and social studies to teach in middle school in Illinois.
Thank you to you beautiful human being, and to all teachers listening. Raw, that was some deep crap. This section should be sponsored by H&R Block, tax advisors in every regard. But it is a fascinating question. I mean, on one hand tonight, we did see Oaktree Capitals Inter Milan go up against the nation state of Qatar, and full deeply sure Oaktree, as I understand them, do look for distressed assets to try and work out how to leverage them and then flip them, which is not exactly what you want about your football team. I think few people were more surprised that Inter Milan got into the final and Oak Tree Capital. But God bless them. I mean, how do you? Are you asking emotionally? How do we think about this? Ultimately, American equity investors, the good and the bad, against nation state. Because to me, the only difference, well, there's many differences, but the profound difference, Raw, is that the PSG project and Manchester City, to a large degree, had the ability, wage bill wise, to just elevate the market to a pain point in which only they could compete.
Yeah, and I think I think Patrick made loads of great points there. I would point out it is now 3 minutes to midnight in Germany. So, if I'm not the most coherent answerer of these questions, then I feel as though I have a certain amount of, rationale behind that. So I think he's right that there is a resistance to. Football has got a weird attitude to money. Football has developed a really weird attitude to money in the last 20 years for various reasons, which I'm more than happy to go into at great length at some point this summer. In the sense that, as Patrick says, we as fans actively encourage our teams to lose loads of money and to an extent go into genuine existential threat just to sign a new player. It's insane. And I, as a Liverpool fan, and in fact, as a journalist, would say that FSG, although they have had their low moments, FSG are pretty good owners. They're as good as you're going to get, I think, in modern football, in terms of their openness to ideas, their general kind of spending policy, and their willingness to learn from their mistakes. They are in the midst of trying to spend $130 million on Florian Wirtz. I would like to think the section of Liverpool fans who complain about not spending enough might see that and think, I'll keep quiet for a bit. They won't. They will immediately say, well, we need to sign a striker. Why haven't you signed Hugo Ekitike as well?
And don't put ticket prices up.
And don't put ticket prices. What are you doing with these ticket prices?
Yeah,
why are the ticket prices going up?
Ticket prices.
But I think the broader point on salary caps, yeah, it's difficult because you need to get all these these distinct entities to align. I suppose it would have been more feasible had Britain still been in the EU. You might have been able to do something in some way, like at European level, because that's where you need to do it. The idea is, you need to do it across the world. You don't need to do it across the world. You need to do it in the Champions League countries, and that's it. But obviously, my countrymen had the great foresight to remove ourselves from the EU 9 years ago, which is a decision we're all absolutely delighted with and has definitely worked in our favour. So that's not really possible anymore. But I agree with you. I can't tell you how much I agree with you, because the compelling stories this season have been Crystal Palace winning the Cup, Sunderland getting promoted. Newcastle is a more complicated example because of the Saudi ownership, but to see Newcastle win the Carabao Cup was wonderful. I think last week, Roger, when we did our review of the season, that Dan Burn goal in that Carabao Cup final, it hurt me and it hurt my son, but it was a wonderful footballing moment, an incredible story to witness that unfurl at Wembley. Liverpool winning the league, a team that isn't ultimately owned by a nation state. They're not an underdog, but they're not an overdog either. They're just like a normal-sized dog. And it has felt that those stories are much more compelling. They do engage more people. And I don't understand on some level, despite having spent nearly 20 years talking to people who run football teams and run football organizations, I don't understand why they don't get that. I don't understand why they look at declining viewing figures for games, certainly across here, and instead of thinking, people can't afford to pay for satellite subscriptions, so they're not watching football as much, they think, what if we introduce extra time sudden death multi-ball to improve the spectacle? There is a complete inability. Do you know what it reminds me of? A TV producer friend of mine once said that the bit of the TV broadcast that costs the most money and has the most thought around a football match is halftime, because that's the bit the producers can control. That's the bit where you can say, if you're a producer, I've made a difference there. The game just happens. And I think there's an awful lot of people around football who are trying to control the bit they can control without thinking at all about the game.
We only watch for Lincoln Park at the end of the day.
That's why we're in it for a 6-minute Lincoln Park.
Yeah, and by the way, still 6 minutes too long, some would say.
But I think that issue is something that people in football should look at and say, look, actually, this has been quite a refreshing season. It wasn't a great Premier League season in a lot of ways, but
it's fantastic.
It was refreshing in the sense of you had that emotional high of Palace winning the Cup. You had Newcastle winning a trophy. You had Sunderland getting promoted. You want more teams to compete for these honours. You do not want to shrink your world. You want to engage as many people as possible. And I think on some level, as we saw tonight, when a nation state plays a distressed asset venture capital firm, which is the derby we all dreamed of as children, there's only one winner. And the more that happens, the less compelling the sport is. And if the answer to that is, it's amazing how often in the last sort of 20 years, European football has sent these delegations to the US to say, what can we learn from American sports? And they always looked at the things that make money. They've never looked at the things that the Americans have, a lot of which are alien to us, that maintain competitive balance. Because there is a lot more of that across US sports than there is in Europe. I find it really odd they don't notice that bit. Go on.
Can I just say, Rory, look at the way in which the Detroit Lions have been put on national TV and gained amazing traction in terms of this. And they are like Crystal Palace. They've been kind of beaten around and in the dumps, or Sunderland, and they are on national TV and they drew immense audiences. Detroit is not a huge market, but it is a example of you give people a chance, you show that there is a competitive merit-based sporting enterprise that you can watch. People will always love to see it up and comer.
Amen to that, you beautiful man in Evanston. I would just say Detroit Lions, glad all over, and you make me feel like there's nothing stopping Everton. Now we got the nation state of Houston, Texas behind us. We're going to the moon. Christina Stotts, hello there, in the chat says, Rory, you have to write about this in your newsletter this summer. By the way, great job with that first newsletter. Yes, Rory Smith now has a newsletter. Subscribe on our webpage. It is just an honour of a lifetime to carry the Rory Smith byline. It is late. I've been up since 4 o'clock. I drove to Philadelphia today to spend some time with Tyler Adams and eat a cheesesteak in that order. But Rory, my last question for you, I asked it earlier. What do you think Kylian Mbappe is feeling tonight as he goes to bed, having watched this in Madrid with, no doubt, with Trent Alexander-Arnold and Jude Bellingham by his side, as he looks at his hometown team having, rejected them, having, exited, but they're watching them soar without him to today's heady height.
Well, I think that's probably the most eloquent answer to Erin's question about Galactico culture, isn't it? That they sold the star who was weighing them down and found a new lease of life. And they now look like a team, and they won it because they are a fully functioning team that fits together perfectly. PSG, they are incredible to watch, really hard to stop, and it's because they're all they're acting in unity. They're in kind of fluid. They're in fluid motion in a way that they weren't with Mbappe, because everything started and ended with Kylian. I think it's a bit weird how he's been cast as the bad guy in the PSG story, if I'm completely honest.
By all of them, by the players.
Yeah, they've all really latched onto the. Yeah, it was all Kylian's fault.
Yeah.
Everything. Yeah. God, that Kylian. I think that's a bit strange, and it's probably unfair on him. But there is a lesson in that ultimately, not just for all clubs, but maybe a little bit for Kylian himself.
Yes, no doubt. I would advise you to listen to Sting, Dream of the Blue Turtles. If you love someone, don't just set them free. Sell them to Real Madrid for a small fortune. And God bless. I mean, it is a fascinating philosopher's question, the set of emotions he's feeling for his hometown club. But God bless. We have a massive week coming up in the Men in Blazers Media Network. We're going to turn the page on the club football season. We're entering international waters where there are no laws. I'd like to say there is hope. There is hope. I've just spent the day, as I said, with Tyler Adams in Philadelphia. And I mentioned this in our Raven newsletter this week. What we're going to release from Tyler is really, I found it quite fascinating. But we have a new voice joining us next week to lead our coverage of the US men's national team, charging into next summer's World Cup. All I say is save the date. This time next week, June 7th, US men's national team taking on Turkey. And I'll live stream the game with our new signing. I think it's on TNT. The broadcast. It's the altcast of the main broadcast. We'll be joined by Chris Paul and Cam Jordan. It is an honour to be doing what we do with these kind of human beings, revelling in the football. It'll be like Beckham and Friends, but different. Until then, GFOP's Raw, thank you for staying up late with us live from Munich Stadium. We will not forget when all you want to do is eat some Bratkartoffeln and get some Wurst down you.
Roger, I've been to, just as you know, for regular listeners, I went to the Spatenhouse last night and to Chi Tu, my Vietnamese place, today.
Yeah.
Spatenhouse, decent sausage. Apparently the strudel was very good. I arrived too late to eat it. Chi Tu, world class. Go
Which
immediately.
Spatenhouse? Was it a mob scene? Was it just like
It was just the most Bavarian. It was just like a whole Bavarian thing going on there. It was. I ate some sausages on some sauerkraut.
Do you like it when you're in that vibe? Because there's an amazing place in Columbus, Ohio that I actually can't wait to go back to. Schmidt's House of Sausage, Haus. Any restaurant that spells itself with an Haus, I'm just like
Classy
totally
touch.
fascinated. It's both wonderful and eerie going to that atmosphere to some degree.
I don't think I decorate my living room like that, but it's nice to indulge occasionally.
Oh, come here, little kinder, let me fatten you up, and then I will kill you. Raw, be safe, you beautiful man. It's incredible to be with you. Let's not take a second of watching football together for granted. Big love, courage.